Believe it or not, the way pretty much everyone thinks about investing today, a huge part of it comes down to a single paper written way back in 1952 by a PhD student named Harry Markowitz. It was a total game changer. So today, we're going to dive into that paper and see how it took a simple, age-old piece of wisdom and turned it into the bedrock of modern finance. You've heard this a million times, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's just common sense. But what's fascinating is that before Markowitz came along, in the world of finance, that's all it was, just a saying. There wasn't any real hard math behind why it was a good idea. So that's what this explainer is all about. How he took that simple piece of folk wisdom and turned it into a scientific principle that, honestly, every serious investor now lives by. All right, so let's get into it. To really appreciate why this paper was such a revolution, we have to travel back in time. We need to see what the investing world looked like before 1952. The main idea back then was, well, it was incredibly simple, but as Markowitz was about to prove, it was also deeply flawed.
So before Markowitz, the whole game of investing basically had one rule: make as much money as possible. That's it. The thinking was that an investor's job was simply to hunt down the stocks or bonds that were expected to have the highest future returns. I mean, it sounds pretty logical on the surface, right? But it leads you down a very, very dangerous path.
And here's where that logic takes you. If your only goal is to get the biggest return, then what's the most rational thing to do? Well, you find that one single stock you think is going to be the superstar, and you dump every penny you have into it. A total all-or-nothing bet. All your eggs right into that one basket. And this is where Harry Markowitz enters the picture. He sees this go-all-in logic and just completely shuts it down with this one killer line from his paper. He basically says, look, any rule for investing that doesn't end up telling you to diversify is just plain wrong. It's not a good explanation for how people actually invest, and it's definitely not a good guide for how they should invest. Okay, so if just chasing the highest return is the wrong move, what's the right one? Well, this is where Markowitz's genius really shines through. He introduced a second absolutely critical idea into the equation: risk. He argued that investing isn't a one-dimensional game. It's a trade-off. So on one hand, you've got what every investor has always been after: expected return. The paper just calls it E. This is the good stuff, the profit, the upside. It's the average return you hope to get from all your investments. Markowitz put it perfectly. He called it a desirable thing. But then he brings in the other side of the coin. He calls it variance, or V. And V is basically his mathematical word for risk. Think of it like turbulence on a flight. It's the shakiness, the volatility, the uncertainty around that nice average return you're hoping for. And this, he stated, is an undesirable thing. So you see the huge change here? The old rule was just a straight line, a mad dash for returns. But Markowitz's new EV rule completely reframes the whole thing. It's not a sprint anymore, it's a balancing act. The new goal is to get as much of that desirable E as you can, while at the very same time keeping that undesirable V as low as possible. And this new way of thinking, this EV framework, it gives investors a completely new mission. Your quest is no longer to find that one golden ticket, that single best stock. Nope. Your job now is to build something called an efficient portfolio. So what on earth is an efficient portfolio? Well, think of it like this. It's the best of all possible worlds. It means one of two things. Either, for a certain amount of return you want to make, you're taking on the least possible amount of risk to get it. Or, looking at it the other way, for a certain level of risk you're comfortable with, you're getting the absolute highest possible return. You literally can't do any better. This is a massive mental shift, right? The whole game has changed. You're not a treasure hunter anymore, digging for that one magic stock. Now, you're more like an architect. You're designing a portfolio, carefully choosing from a whole menu of options, each with its own unique blend of expected return and risk. Okay, that all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do it? How do you lower that variance, that risk? Well, Markowitz showed that it's not just about buying a bunch of different things. It's about buying the right mix of things. And he had the perfect example for this in his paper. He said, imagine you own 60 different railway stocks. You might feel pretty diversified, right? 60 is a lot, but you're not. If the railroad industry takes a hit, all 60 of your stocks are likely going down together. A truly diversified portfolio has stocks from all over the place: rail, utilities, mining, you name it.
Why? Because it's way less likely that all those different industries are going to have a bad year at the exact same time.
And that right there is the key. That's the secret sauce. Real diversification isn't about how many things you own. It's about how those things relate to each other. You want to own some things that zig when the other things zag. You want things that don't all move up and down in perfect sync. Now, there's a mathematical term for this zig and zag relationship, and it's called covariance. This is the engine that makes the whole thing work. If two stocks have high covariance, it means they tend to move together. To build a portfolio with low risk, low variance, you need to find investments that have low covariance with each other. This is the math that finally proved why you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket.
So, when you step back and look at the big picture, you really can't overstate the impact of this one paper. Markowitz didn't just come along and make a small change to an old idea. He blew up the old idea and built a brand new philosophy of investing from the ground up.
This was a complete revolution. The whole focus of investing changed. It went from this narrow little game of pick the winning stock to the much bigger, smarter process of build the right portfolio. The goal wasn't just this blind chase for the highest returns anymore. It became about intelligently managing that trade-off between risk and return. It was a total paradigm shift.
And that's really his legacy, isn't it? Before this paper, investing was treated kind of like an art. It was about gut feelings, intuition, trying to predict the future. After Markowitz, it became a science of measuring risk, of understanding correlations, and of systematically managing trade-offs. But you know what's maybe the most incredible part? Markowitz's own humility about it all. After he laid out this entire brilliant framework, he basically admitted that the really hard part is figuring out what numbers to plug into this model, actually forming educated guesses about future returns and risks. He ended his paper with these words, acknowledging that his revolutionary work, it was really just the beginning. So, in the end, Markowitz gave us the how. He gave us the mathematical blueprint for building the best possible portfolio. But he left us all with an even bigger question. What about the what? What do we actually believe about the future of all these different investments? Answering that question, well, that's the challenge that every single one of us still faces today.